now going to copy me every week. You're going to work 6 and you're going to rest on the 7th day. By the way, Ellen White is not the only one who teaches that the Sabbath and the week were marked out at the beginning. Henry Morris, a noted creationist, in his book Biblical Creationism, page 62, said this: "The Lord himself had worked 6 days, then rested on the 7th, setting thereby a permanent pattern for the benefit of mankind." So what conclusions can we reach? Number 1, it was God who kept the first Sabbath. Number 2, the Sabbath applies to Adam and Eve, beginning with the second Sabbath of human history. The reason for this is because Adam and Eve had not worked 6, and the commandment says work 6 and rest the 7th. They could not have kept that first Sabbath holy until it was holy, and it became holy when the day ended. Furthermore, they could not follow God's example unless God had first given them what? An example. Now, you say, but what about man on that first Sabbath? What did man do on that first Sabbath? When I say man, I'm speaking generically, man and woman, humankind. What did they do? You know, we always want to know what they were doing. Well, the fact is that they entered God's rest. What day of the week were Adam and Eve created? There's some people who are doubting that these days, but the Bible makes it very, very clear that Adam and Eve, male and female, were created the 6th day. Because in Genesis chapter 1, in verses 26 to 28, God blesses them. He tells them to be fruitful and multiply. He creates them male and female. And then it says, and God saw everything that he had made, and it was the evening, and it was very good, and it was the evening and the morning of the 6th day. So in other words, they were created on the 6th day. Now let me ask you this then. Were Adam and Eve present when God rested? Yes, they were. What do you suppose they were doing? They were watching their father rest. Let me ask you, what's more important? An example that a parent gives or a command that a parent gives? Does it have more authority for the parent to say, do this, or to exemplify this? You see, God's example is far more powerful than any command that he could have given, because he's exemplifying to his children what to do. You know, I remember the first time that, remember these Legos? I'm dating myself now. These little plastic pieces that you could build things with. And are they still available? Oh, that's a miracle. Everybody wants video games these days. But anyway, I remember the first time that those came out, I bought a set for my son. I was a little boy at that time. And so I opened up, it came in a tube, so I opened up the tube and I poured out all those pieces, and I could basically just see his eyes get great big. What am I going to do with this? So what I did, I took out the instructions and I started putting the pieces together and I built something, and then I said to my son, I said, now you saw how I did it. And so I took it apart and I said, now you do it. What's more powerful, me to tell him how to do it or to exemplify how to do it? Of course, it is to exemplify. God exemplified Sabbath observance. In other words, Adam and Eve were invited to enter the delight of God's rest. Allow me to read you another couple of statements from the Spirit of Prophecy on this. Patriarchs and Prophets, page 47. The reason I read so many statements from the Spirit of Prophecy is because she's so much in harmony with Scripture. See, she caught these points. She's not guessing. Notice page 47. After resting upon the 7th day, God sanctified it or set it apart as a day of rest for man. So it becomes a day of rest for man after that first Sabbath is gone. Then she says this: following the example of the Creator, man was to rest upon this sacred day. Why? That as he should look upon the heavens and the earth, he might reflect upon God's great work of creation. And that as he should behold the evidences of God's wisdom and goodness, his heart might be filled with love and reverence for his Maker. And then on page 48, she continues saying, God saw that a Sabbath was essential for man, even in paradise. Listen, if the Sabbath was essential in paradise, what about today? Amen. God saw that a Sabbath was essential for man, even in paradise. He needed to lay aside his own interests and pursuits for one day of the 7, that he might more fully contemplate the works of God and meditate upon his power and goodness. It's a day of meditation and what? Contemplation. He needed a Sabbath to remind him more vividly of God and to awaken gratitude, because all that he enjoyed and possessed came from the beneficent hand of the Creator. You know, there's something very interesting as you read Scripture. Never once is the Sabbath called the Sabbath of the Jews. In order for the Sabbath to be the Sabbath of the Jews would have had to have been the ones who rested first. Why is the Sabbath called the Sabbath of the Lord thy God? Why does God say, take away your foot from my holy day? Because the Sabbath is His before it is ours. Amen. It was His rest before our rest. And when we rest, we are entering His rest. Amen. Are you with me? Yes. By the way, this is the fundamental reason why Sunday can never be the Sabbath. Because in order for Sunday to be the Sabbath, God would have had to make Sunday holy by His rest. And there's no reference in Scripture that God ever rested on Sunday. In order for Sunday to be holy, God would have had to have rested on Sunday to make it a holy day. But the Bible tells us that only God rested on the seventh-day Sabbath. So when we rest on Sabbath, we are entering His rest. Now, you can enter rest on Sunday, and you're entering, excuse the expression, you're entering the Pope's rest. You know, when he says in Dies Domini, you know, Sunday is a day of the resurrection. That's the day that the church has decided is a special day of rest. You can say that till you're blue in the face. But Sunday can never be holy because it's not the day that God rested. To enter His rest, you have to rest on the day in which He rested. So the issue at the end of time, folks, is not one day versus another day. It's whether you're going to enter God's rest or whether you're going to enter the rest that is offered by the beast. Important issue, yes? An extremely important issue. It's an issue of authority. Yes. Whose authority do you accept? Do you accept God's authority or do you accept the authority of the beast? The day you rest reveals whose authority you accept. Amen. What makes the Sabbath better is not that it has more hours or it's sunnier or whatever. What makes the Sabbath special is God rested on that day, and we can only enter His rest on the day on which He rested. Now, do you think the devil loves the Sabbath? Hey, you know, you want to know how much the devil hates the Sabbath? Just look at the history of the Sabbath. All you have to do is look at the history. Let me go through it very quickly in the last 9 or 10 minutes that we have here. God gave the Sabbath to Israel and told Israel to keep His holy Sabbath. And what did they do for 800 years before the Babylonian captivity? You read Ezekiel chapter 20, God says, you profaned my Sabbath, you trampled on my Sabbath. He said, take your foot away from my Sabbath. In other words, they defiled and desecrated the Sabbath. By the way, desecrate means to make unholy. See, in Spanish we have the word sagrado, which means holy. So to desecrate means to trample on the holiness of the Sabbath. So that's what they did for 800 years. Finally, God says, that's it. I'm sending you captive to Babylon for 70 years. And by the way, if you read Jeremiah 17, verses 26 and 27, you're going to notice that the reason why God sent Israel into captivity was because they were breaking the Sabbath. They were trampling on the Sabbath. God said, if you keep my Sabbath, Jerusalem will stand forever. If not,